to change the brake pads, I have to take off the caliper, and on this setup, the caliper is held in by this bolt, which bolts into the caliper pin. And if I just try to loosen this up, the caliper pin spins too, so I need to grab some pliers to hold it down while I loosen it. And it's the same at the bottom. So now that the caliper bolts are on, it's hard on here, so I'm gonna use a little pry bar to loosen it. And we're gonna want something to put the caliper on, because we don't want to let the brake hose hold the caliper down. So on the rotor, it says that the minimum thickness is 26.5. So I would take my vernier caliper and measure different parts of the rotor to make sure that it's within the limit. But since the splash guard is in the way, it does not fit in between. So the only place I have is on top of the brake caliper. So that's where I'm gonna measure from. So it's reading 28.1, which is still in the good zone. So they still have plenty of life left, so I don't have to do anything to the rotors. My brake pads are still good and still have a lot of life in them, so I'm not gonna be changing them. But if I were to change them, I would take this old pad off. I'll put it in the caliper, and I'll use this tool to compress the calipers in. And then when I get my new brake pad, I will put it in here, and I'll use some caliper grease on the back of it so it won't make any noise. And also, since I'm already here, I'm gonna take out my pins and I'm gonna clean them up and give them some new grease. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of grease on them. And I'm going to just wipe down the excess grease that came out. And once that is done, I could go ahead and put my caliper back on. And I couldn't find any torque specs on the bolts, and the best I could find is that they said to just hold it down with pliers and to tighten this with the ratchet. And now that that's done, just in case I got any grease on the rotor, I'm gonna go ahead and spray some brake cleaner on it and wipe it down. And since you compress the pistons backwards, before you go and drive your vehicle, you're gonna want to make sure to go inside the car and pump the brakes until you feel them to get hard. That way the piston compresses onto the pads, so it's able to push the pads onto the rotor.